leaving debt aside, let's pretend debt wasn't a problem. Just this would be requiring all of our attention to figure out how to mitigate. But it's just one of many things that we're really ignoring and not really focusing on. So this is completely unsustainable as well. How about minerals? Minerals? Yeah, minerals extraction. Certainly you've heard, we're all going to drive electric cars and we're going to use lithium batteries. And sometimes you hear people vaguely, ask the question, do we have enough lithium? But let's go beyond that. Let's imagine that we had thought peak oil, this thing is a really big deal, and we have to get away from fossil fuels. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to start using alternative energy, clean energy. That's a great story. In fact, you can read that story every single day in dozens of different journals, and you can see it on TV. It's a very common story. We're going to move to clean energy. The problem is when you actually understand what it takes to set one of these systems up. What do we mean clean energy? Well, we mean these things called solar panels, nice aluminum frame. They've got all this polysilicon in there. Maybe they've got some silver as a soldering agent, or we're talking about a giant wind tower and it's got these giant neodymium magnets in this rotor system up there and a lot of copper windings and it's got a concrete base, all of that. So you need minerals to create new energy systems. So let's go there. Let's take a look. What would be required to move into a new clean energy future? Fortunately, there are people out there researching it, just a few, but this is one of the better ones out there. Professor Simon Michaud. Let's listen in to what he has to say. Well, let me put in my earpiece so I can hear too. Listen in to what he has to say about what it would take to move to the first generation alternative/clean energy to get away from fossil fuels. Here's what he says.
Then it all is summed together. So everything we need is summed together per metal, and that gives us this column here. Total metal required to produce one generation of technology units to phase out fossil fuels. And so that we've got these numbers here. The next column is global metal production as it was from mining in 2019. So this is all from the USGS and the BGR. The final column is how many years of production at the 2019 rate would be needed to hit the actual volumes needed.
Oh, hold on, just 3 columns. This isn't that hard. This is the kind of math that's always missing from the conversation. So let's go over it a little bit more carefully because Professor Michaud is making a really important point. I'm so glad he did this work. This is the kind of work you have to have what I would call an informed conversation, to have the appropriate level of context. This isn't even that hard, but we should be having this conversation because so much hinges on us being able to move to a clean energy future. So let's look at this again. One more time. Let me get my drawing tool out here because you know how I like to do that from time to time. So this is how much would be required in this column right here. So that's 4,575,000,000 and change tons of copper. That would be for all the copper motors, all the copper windings. What he's done in this study, he's asked the question, how many solar panels, how many wind towers, how many electric cars? There's a whole mix of things we would need to move away from fossil fuels. That's the goal, right? That's what we've been told we have to do. And that's what the WEF seems to be serious about. That's what the ESG standards are about. Pretty serious, moving us away from that stuff. That's what many governments in the West are actively trying to maneuver us away from. Fine, but we have to understand what's required. So this is his best guess right here. This analysis could be off by a little bit, probably off by some, one way or the other, but it's a good starting point for the conversation because it shows how ridiculous the so-called clean energy future actually is. Because then we go into, well, what's obvious? What was the total amount of mining in the world in 2019? And then you just divide column A by column B and you get a number which says, it would take us 189.1 years at 2019 rates to mine enough copper in order to be able to get all the copper out of the ground we would need to have version 1 of this new clean energy future. 189 years. We don't have 189 years. You know what's going to happen way before 189 years? Peak oil. Why is that important? Because we use oil to mine copper. We use oil to grow food. We use oil to conduct wars. We use oil to move ourselves about and take vacations. One of these things is going to have to be put on the chopping block. What's it going to be? Are we going to mine all this copper or are we going to grow food? I mean, that's the decisions we're going to have to be making soon. And if we want, particularly people in my generation, if we want to create a world worth inheriting, these are the kinds of important context rich conversations we have to have in order to even passably be a credible adult in this conversation. Well, how about nickel? Whoops, we need 400 years at current rates to mine enough nickel, right? Whoa, what about lithium? Would you believe 9,920 years? It's just like, come on, we're into absurd territory here. Germanium down there, we'll only need 29,000 years at current rates to mine everything we need. Vanadium, 7,000 years. On and on and on. It's just, this is simply says that this is a completely incredible, as in, I can't believe this. It's not credulous. This is an incredible idea that we're going to move to this alternative / clean energy future. So we need to be talking about this. We need to be talking about this in terms other than vague hand-waving stuff. We'll pass a clean energy bill. We'll pass an Inflation Reduction Act, and we'll throw a few $1 billion towards this thing. And next thing you know, there'll be a few solar panels on the roof. This fundamentally fails physics 101, and that's a big problem. But it gets even bigger when we start to connect some of these dots. Okay.